Good morning, everyone. So my research area is multi-agent systems, and perhaps more broadly we can think of that as socially aware AI. And I'm going to tell you today about this topic, which is some work on various strands of research on generic approaches to reasoning about how we get social coordination. And when I talk about generic, I'm really contrasting some of the analyses that are traditionally done with game theory, where there's sort of rich ways to encode individual problems in very clever ways and then reason about the strategic outcomes. I'm interested in finding ways that we can reason about social coordination across a range of scenarios, so we can have agents that are sort of, not just solving the same problem all the time. So these are the research questions that we're looking at. So in what circumstances can self-interested and rational agents agree to cooperate towards some kind of collective action or collective good? Game theory tells us that if the agents are rational and self-interested, there's a number of things that can prevent them from being able to collaborate. One is the risk of getting the sucker payoff, so someone else chooses something selfish and they look silly and lose out. The temptation to actually be the person who defects on the others and causes them to be suckers, and the lack of any mechanisms to really trust the other people and build a sort of a lasting relationship as well. And what we know in the real world is that people do cooperate, not all the time, but we certainly can in certain situations, and that's basically because we have particular kinds of knowledge and processes that help us to feel confident and trusting in each other. Now, I've brought my last slide forward in case I don't get there, because I guess this is the important part. Everything I'm going to tell you is essentially good old-fashioned AI reasoning with symbolic knowledge. Now, of course, nowadays we have deep neural networks and foundation models and so on, which is much more generalizable and less fragile than symbolic AI. So I'm actually interested in taking this work forward and asking questions about what kind of social knowledge might we find in things like large language models and how could we use it. And so if anyone's interested in talking about that and if you've got any ideas, let me know. So one of the things we've looked at, and when I say we, it's me and my PhD students, two of which are here today. So one kind of coordination that's not explicit, it's kind of passive, is the situation of information or alignment cascades. So an example of that is that there's a new fashion or fad, everyone kind of observes in a kind of a sequence, some people come before them and they're wearing the newest hat or the newest clothing or something. Everyone has their own personal information of some intrinsic value of this fad that's noisy and may be wrong, but what they notice particularly is all the decisions of all the people before them. And what can happen then is essentially prior analyses have shown that the private information you have about the true value gets swamped by all the choices you've seen everyone make, and you can end up getting locked in, the society can end up getting locked into a cascade of actions that are all the same, even though they may essentially be the wrong choice. So we've created a detailed Bayesian model of the information that's received in this process, and we found that, unlike some of the prior work, we found that cascades will not necessarily occur if agent choices are probabilistic. Excuse me. Another strand of research is reasoning about expectations explicitly. So a lot of the decisions we make are based on social expectations that come from promises, excuse me, commitments, norms, and so on. So we use a technology called the event calculus that we've extended to understand these expectations. And you can see my student Abera, who has a poster that covers the stuff on the right here. The final thing I'm going to talk about is reasoning about common knowledge. We've got a couple of things we're doing there. So at the moment we're looking at implementing the original theory of common knowledge from the philosopher David Lewis, which is different from the later logical approaches because it focuses on not what common knowledge is, but how it comes about in some cases, in most cases. So there's sufficient conditions. And we're looking at implementing that inside a practical reasoning system in the form of a forward chaining rule engine rather than a complex theorem prover. We then look at how we combine all that information together and reason about how common knowledge affects collective action using something called a Markov logic network. And we're looking at a case study from classical Athens. There's a existing record of quite a long and complicated speech from a prosecutor in a trial for treason that talks about some complex ideas about social obligation towards a collective goal and what would happen if the jurors do and do not punish this merchant who abandoned the city, was alleged to abandon the city at a time of crisis when Athens had lost a big important battle and everyone was feeling a bit unsafe. So I could talk about this, but I think I'm about to run out of time, so I'll just stop there. Thank you.